Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plitnick, the president of Rethinking Foreign Policy and the author of the Cutting Through newsletter on Substack. As I record this, the holiest day of the Jewish year, Yom Kippur, is just ending here on the East Coast. As prayers started this morning in uh, in the United Kingdom, this day was chosen by one man to launch an attack on a synagogue when he knew it would be at its fullest, the beginning of the day-long prayers that are part of the rite of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the culmination of 10 days of awe, when Jews reflect on their sins, try to atone for them, and hope to be written for the next year into the Book of Life. Well, obviously, that didn't happen for two worshippers at a Manchester synagogue today for Yom Kippur, and this is a tragedy. So three people were killed, including the attacker. Three others were wounded, uh, and I'm sure everyone at the shul today was traumatized for the rest of their lives. Little is known about the attacker as I'm recording this. All I've heard is that he's a UK citizen of Syrian descent. His ancestry, his ethnicity, which incidentally is not necessarily Muslim. Not all Syrians are Muslims. And I have yet to hear for certain that he was Muslim, although you'd never know it from the way many people are just simply assuming facts not yet in evidence. But his ancestry leads many to believe that this action, this murderous action, was connected to Palestine, and that may well turn out to be the case. Certainly is not unlikely. But whether it was or not, this was an abhorrent, senseless, vile, anti-Semitic act. Uh, is appalling on every level. And politically speaking, it's futile. It helps no one. Uh, it brings no cause forward, no matter what that cause is, be it white supremacy, Christian supremacy, the Palestinian cause, the pro-Israel cause. It's not going to help anyone. Although, unfortunately, it took no time at all for some of the more cynical actors to try and find a way to use it for their own cause. But I'll tell you, I've been watching social media all day since I've heard about this. And the overwhelming, and I mean overwhelming response that I've seen from Arabs, Muslims, Palestinians, Palestinian solidarity activists, of course, Jewish people, and just people in general, have been outrage and condemnation across the board. I mean, for sure, there have been some who have made excuses for this action on and come up with all sorts of things to blame other than this person from all sides of the political spectrum and trying to draft this incident into their narrative. But for the most part, people simply said this was an act of hate that cannot be tolerated, is completely unacceptable, and we should not allow it to feed to fan the flames of hate that have caused it. And that was what I've seen most people say. There's a small minority that are the exception, and of course, that small minority engenders reactions from another group of people, et cetera, et cetera. And you start to get the impression that that's some group's majority response. It isn't. Most certainly, every activist I know, every Palestinian activist I know has condemned this action. And I know a lot of them. And I follow them and I looked and I saw what they said. So anyone who tells you that Palestinians support this, Palestinian solidarity activists support this, that is a lie. It is just not true. You can find all sorts of people who will support an action like this, but you won't find a lot of them. You're not going to find a lot on the right. You're not going to find a lot on the left. You're not going to find a lot on the pro-Israel side, certainly, and you're not going to find a lot on the pro-Palestine side or anywhere in between. However, What I have seen from some pro-Israel people is opportunistic, cynical, disgusting actions to try and use this activity, this action by this man to once again claim that Zionism and Judaism are the same thing, that speaking out against uh, Israel's genocide in Gaza somehow led to this. That condemning genocide by Israel and condemning war crimes by Israel is anti-Semitic. It is most certainly not. It is quite the opposite. In fact, that is why so many Jews are doing just that. To take an incident like this one, that is a horrifying tragedy on the holiest day, and to cynically use it to advance a political agenda. And most people are not doing that. I want to say this. I mean, most people I've seen have not been doing it. But the people who have, some of them are the ones who count the most. Uh, and, what I mean by that is we're talking about the leaders of Israel. What did Benjamin Netanyahu say after his rather perfunctory, I thought, tweet about sending his condolences to the families of those affected? He said, and I'm quoting his tweet here. As I warned at the UN, weakness in the face of terrorism only brings more terrorism. Only strength and unity can defeat it. It's a bunch of crap. Okay? Because what he's talking about when he says weakness, and some of his colleagues in the Knesset and in the Israeli government will make this clear. But he's referencing his speech at the UN where he condemned states, including the UK, for recognizing a theoretical Palestinian state. That's what he's saying. He's saying that that action led to this, and that is a crock of shit. And first of all, it makes no sense, logically speaking. Recognizing a Palestinian state had nothing. I mean, it kept saying, well, this is a reward to Hamas. No, it didn't. It had nothing to do with Hamas. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It was Israel's actions that prompted all of these countries to do that. It was not Hamas at all. And this is incidentally the wrong reason. Okay, recognition of a Palestinian state should have come because you recognize the right of Palestinians to their self-determination and to their own independence and to their own autonomy. That's why it should have happened. Unfortunately, it's not why it happened. It happened because Israel's committing a genocide, and this was a way for the UK and some other European states to performatively try and get Israel or try and send a message to Israel that they don't like it without actually having to take any action that really affects Israel uh, to try and make them stop it. That's what recognition of a Palestinian state was. It sure as hell did not lead to this action. And by the same token, I reject the idea completely that we hold Israel or the pro-Israel community responsible for this action because of its genocide in Gaza. Because to start with, you have to be an idiot to believe that an action like this in any way contributes to stopping the genocide. Lehefech in Hebrew, the exact opposite. It gives the few powers that are really backing the genocide with all of their might, which is the Israeli and American government, all the excuse they need to continue this genocide, which they're going to do anyway, because as we all know at this point, I think it's become pretty clear that Hamas is very likely to reject Trump's new 20-point plan, and he's already vowed that he will back Israel's genocide to the hilt if they do so. No one is deluded enough to think this action in any way impedes in the slightest the genocide. And I doubt this guy did either. This guy simply was angry and lashed out at the Jewish community. We don't know who he killed. We don't know whether they were supporters of Israel. Many Jews have turned away from Israel because of the genocide. Many Jews were not supporters of Israel long before the genocide, this Jew included. Okay, so you have no way of knowing that. So it is just wrong to first of all to collectively blame the Jewish people for what Israel's doing. That's different than blaming, for example, an organization that is dedicating itself to enabling Israel's genocide. If you attack in some way, I think a violent attack is useless and, in general, wrong on any level. With the lone exception of the Palestinian people having the right to resist the occupation and certainly a genocide. They have the right to violent resistance. Okay, that's not what this is. Even attacking more explicitly pro-Israel groups like AIPAC, uh, the ADL that has done nothing but run cover for Israel's genocide since it started, and other groups, violent attacks on those are not legitimate, a little bit more understandable, but attacking Jews as Jews because of this is completely unacceptable and completely ludicrous because many Jews have publicly acted in opposition to the genocide. And so you don't know who was killed. We don't know what the views of the two people who were killed in that synagogue were. There are British Jews that have been opposing the genocide from the start. And let me tell you, the one day of the year that even many secular Jews go to synagogue is Yom Kippur. So the idea that this would be in any way justified is just as absurd from that end. But even more so, the notion that this was enabled or in any way triggered by the UK's recognition of a Palestinian state is absurd. I mean, absolutely absurd. And Netanyahu knows this. Okay. Netanyahu and all the other Israeli leaders who spoke out and tried to make this connection, they know that they're lying. They know that they're being manipulative. They know they're being cynical. They don't care. They don't care how many Jews they put at risk with their actions either. They don't. They never have. Israel has never cared about the safety of Jews unless they could use it for their own ends. I mean, we can go back to the days of the Holocaust and the debates over saving Jews from the Nazis if they weren't going to come to Palestine and help with the Zionist movement. There were those Zionists who did not care, and actually, many of them were on the right in the revisionist movement. They said, it doesn't matter. Our job is to save those people. Some of them, there were debates all over. There was no clean lines in these kinds of things. But uh, the fact of the matter is, Israel has never, ever been about the safety of Jews outside of Israel or even inside of Israel. Israel has played fast and loose with the security of their own citizens since their inception. But what's happened today is so appalling and so cynical. Listen to the words, for example, of Shlomo Kachi of the Likud Party, the communications minister. He said that today's action was a direct result of quote, Britain's anti-Semitic measures choosing to recognize the Palestinian terror state and abandoning its identity in favor of radical Islam. I mean, the blatant racism in that sentence is appalling enough to recognize a Palestinian terror state. So, in other words, what you're saying is that any Palestinian state is a state of terrorism? You mean like the way Israel is? Is that what you mean? Because there is no more violent state than Israel. There's no more aggressive. No, we're talking about a state that has attacked, what, six other countries just in recent memory that is carrying out a genocide right now as we speak, whose own records show, the IDF's own records reflect through the month of July, 83% of those killed in Gaza were civilians. That's what the IDF says, and they have a pretty broad definition of combatant. So the real number is higher. So please, with the terror state, people in glass houses, right, guys? Kashi continued to say by saying that Britain is showing terrorists that murdering Jews pays off. Really? Is that what Britain showed? Really? By recognizing a Palestinian state, by supposedly endorsing and saying that they expect what the international consensus has been a two-state solution. Okay, I don't believe a two-state solution is either practical or possible anymore, but that's what the international consensus is. Everybody agrees to it except the United States and Israel. Israel used to agree to it, at least rhetorically, while they were doing everything to make it impossible, and abandoning its identity in the favor of radical Islam. Radical Islam, really? That's what we have in Britain. That's who Keir Starmer is, really? I mean, these statements are appalling, and to use the death of two innocent Jews who were simply davening in a shul on Yom Kippur to press that case is the worst kind of anti-Semitism. And so, if we really want to see how bad it can get, well, let's turn to Bezalel Smotrich, because Bezalel Smotrich is going to tell us, right? And he said that the British and European recognition of a Palestinian state is, quote, a display of weakness and moral collapse by standing against Israel's right to self-defense and siding with its anti-Semitic enemies. The weakness encourages terrorism and emboldens it. Again, he's saying this in the context. He's not just saying it, he's saying it in the context of today's event. So again, saying that recognizing a Palestinian state is caused this and is in fact anti-Semitic. That is what he's saying. I want you to ask yourself, what would be the response if a leader, not of Hamas, but of, say, Fatah, or an independent Palestinian who's considered a moderate, would say that what would be the response if they would say that recognizing a Jewish state is anti-Palestinian? Because that's what Israel demands, is that they be recognized by the Palestinians. Incidentally, a demand they make of no one else but the Palestinians, that that the Palestinians recognize Israel as a Jewish state. This has always been a problem. It's abnormal. No state is recognized as anything. It's simply recognized. But this is a sick and racist statement. And again, to say that recognizing a Palestinian state is anti-Semitic is itself anti-Semitic. Do not tie all Jews. Do not tie me and my fellow Jews who have an ethical guideline to them, who oppose genocide, who oppose oppression, who oppose apartheid, who oppose settler colonialism. Do not tie us to Israel, and do not implicate us in Israel's crimes, because we stand against them. And we stand against them most importantly on Yom Kippur. Let's listen to the words of Amichai Chikli, who we can always count on for a good deal of hate. One of the most racist people of any group on the planet. Amichai Chikli says, the feebleness of the British government under Keir Starmer, pouring fuel on the flames with hollow proclamations for a Palestinian terror state, directly enabled this atrocity on the holiest day for the Jewish people. This is what Chikli tweeted. Recognizing a Palestinian state, a terror state? A terror state? Why is it a terror state? The Palestinian Authority has done everything in its power for decades to collaborate with Israel, to maintain Israel's security. And for years and years and years, Israeli and American officials talked about how the Palestinian Authority's security apparatus was the main thing that was preventing attacks from the West Bank. While Benjamin Netanyahu was enabling Qatar to maintain the Hamas government in Gaza so as to undermine the Palestinian Authority. Now, I am no fan of Hamas, and I am no fan of the Palestinian Authority. I am neither a fan of theocratic authoritarians or of corrupt human rights abusing collaborators, the former being Hamas and the latter being Fatah. But this notion that a Palestinian state is a terror state, and to call it that, to say that by definition, um, the Palestinian state must be a terror state because by definition, I grew up with this. Okay, I heard this. Palestinians are all terrorists, according to the way I was raised. Now, I was raised in a very radical pro-Israel environment, pro-settler, the whole works. I met Mayor Kahana when I was a kid. I know this. I know this language. I know where this ideology comes from. I know what it means. Palestinians can't be anything other than terrorists. Why? Because basically the very existence of Palestinians shows that Israel is not the noble story that I was taught as a kid that it was, that so many people have been taught over the years that Israel was, and that projecting an image of an innocent, noble Israel that never existed or even close, and is now whose face has now been revealed as the genocidal apartheid state it is. Lastly, I'll just quote Gideon Sar. Um, he said that anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli incitement, again, those two things he presents as synonymous, and they are far from synonymous. But he said that they, quote, have recently become a widespread phenomenon in the streets of London and cities across Britain and on its campuses. That sound familiar? Trying to bring in the Trumpian version of all this. He also said that, quote, the authorities in Britain have failed to take the necessary action to curb this toxic wave of anti-Semitism and have effectively allowed it to persist, implying again that that's why this hideous event happened today. And I don't care who these two people who were killed and the three people who were injured. I don't care what their politics were. Were they Zionists? I have no idea. I don't care if they were. Okay. A person is entitled to their political beliefs, however appalling and abhorrent I may find them. I have no problem with people who have political beliefs in the sense of, I think they should die. If you commit war crimes, if you're a soldier, if you're carrying out these things, then you are a legitimate target. If you're a Jewish person going to shul who happens to support what Israel's doing, that does not qualify as a death sentence. It simply doesn't. No matter how much I may think you're wrong, and no matter how much I may think you're complicit, you're not actually carrying out the war crimes. You're not a combatant. You're not a legitimate target. Very simple. It is not okay to do this, especially since we have no idea who these people were. And it wouldn't matter. It would not matter. But for the Israeli government to take what happened today on Yom Kippur of all days and to use it to try and cover for genocide and to use it to try and say this is why you must oppress and dispossess an entire people after everything that's been done to them for the last century. You have no sense of what Yom Kippur means if you can do that. You have no sense of right and wrong. You have no sense of atonement because you believe that you have nothing to atone for, no matter how grave your crime is. Because every one of these messages from Chikli, from Sar, from Smotrich, from Netanyahu, every one of these messages is saying Palestinians are not people, and therefore we can do what we want. They have no rights, and therefore we can do what we want. And if you don't agree with us, then you're the one enabling the deaths of Jews. Exactly the opposite. It is Netanyahu and his ilk that create the climate that justifies these actions. They create the climate of hate and of anger. And they spread it around the world. And they spread it to the UK. And they spread it to the United States. And when some deranged person like this takes it and runs with it in this horrifying direction, they try to blame those of us who oppose genocide. And again, the genocide is not why this happened. It's not. It cannot be blamed. I don't care how enraged this person was over the genocide. He didn't attack an Israeli target. He attacked a Jewish target. He didn't attack the people who are committing the war crimes. He attacked worshipers on the holiest day of the Jewish year. None of it's okay. None of it is acceptable. But for Israel to take this and try to use it for their cynical purposes is revolting. And we should all say that is not acceptable. So please like, subscribe. If you can support this work, mitchellplitnick.substack.com, and you'll find the links where you can do that. To those of you out there who have just finished your fast on Yom Kippur, or maybe finished it within the last few days, Mar Chatima Tova, may the next year bring us one where peace and justice and being good to one another for a change is what we're looking at.